everybody. Welcome back to Heart Breathings. It is editing time. I have already started editing my latest novel, The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw. However, I have not made as big strides, great progress as I had hoped, and I have had some struggle focusing. So we're going to talk today about the writer reset, what my plans are for June, and how I am going to finish the edits of this novel and hopefully get it published this summer. So let's get started. So I don't know how many of you have potentially been going through something similar, but for the last couple of months, I have had the most difficult time trying to focus. And I don't fully know what has made this different, but getting into a state of flow and deep work has been more difficult for me. And I have also realized that I have let some of my boundaries around my internet and phone usage get a little bit too wonky, some of my lines here. So I am sort of doubling down for myself because I've started to realize that while I can be distractible and still check emails, get my Facebook group stuff done, even edit videos in a state of somewhat distracted by my phone or other things that are going on, it is extremely difficult for me to do the creative, deep work that is needed to finish a novel. And edits sometimes are even more difficult in terms of the amount of deep focus and deep work they require because there's so many decisions. Like now we're getting into the nitty-gritty details. Like the rough draft has less stakes in some ways because it's like, well, I can always fix that later. But now is later. Now is the time where I'm meant to be fixing the book and sitting down to try to focus on the decisions that need to be made have been extremely difficult for me. So I'm adding to my writer reset a concentration on deep work and what I can do to get myself into deep focus. So this is going to be particularly challenging because, like many of you, my summer is slightly hijacked by having kids at home. And I know not everybody here has kids, but I will be doing a video coming up soon about how to continue to work toward your goals during the summer, even if your schedule has shifted, because some of you have more time over the summer. Some of you who are parents might have a lot less time over the summer, or even if you're unrelated to school or other things like that, you might have different times in your year where your schedule shifts due to different responsibilities or caretaking or even to your own health. So I will have a video coming up on that. But for me, I am trying to get myself to a place of deep focus throughout the summer while also enjoying the heck out of time with my kids. My little girl, who is 3, will be starting pre-K this fall, right before she turns 4. And it's going to be a life-changing kind of thing to have gone from 4 years with a little one at home every day, all day, to having a little bit more of that time freedom. But I also want to enjoy as much time with her as possible. And of course, my son, who will be finishing up 5th grade and turning 11 this summer, is also going to be home with us. So I have created a schedule. Again, I'll share that with you guys later. But my motto for this summer is work hard, play hard. I'm hoping to get into deep focus so I can make the most of the time that I spend working, but also just really enjoy my time with them and have a good time this summer as well. So what we're going to talk about in today's video is really, this is going to be an editing vlog, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about that focus, and I'm going to walk you through the steps that I'm taking to get myself into a focused state to finish this book. I would love to finish it in the month of June. I'm not going to put any pressure on myself by putting up a pre-order or anything like that. However, you guys can be my accountability. Let's finish this book in the month of June. Let's do it. I know I'm capable of it. So let's talk about how I'm going to accomplish that. Okay, so like I said, one thing that has been coming up over and over again is a lack of boundaries around my phone and internet usage. My ability to focus has been severely cut by my distractibility. And I know that even though I have all of my dings and notifications on my phones turned off, that when this doesn't happen to me as much when I'm editing a video or checking emails or doing other things, but when my brain hits a point in the story or the work that feels difficult, I also hit a wall of resistance where my brain is like, I don't want to have to make that decision right now. Why don't you just check your phone and see if anyone's responded to that Instagram? And it feels like, because I'm posting on Instagram or I'm answering people's comments or answering people's emails, it feels like work. It feels like I'm being productive, but I'm also sacrificing the things I want to accomplish most, like making the decisions, getting the edits done, for just sort of like temporary, easy to accomplish tasks that really could be done other times. So I'm going to be setting some boundaries by setting some app limits on my phone. I'm also going to be doing more focused sprints. I have shown you guys this before. I have this Timular device that I like to use for tracking my time. I don't use it all the time, but I do use it sometimes. But this device does not beep at me when my timer is up. It's like if I turn it to writing, it will just go for hours and hours if I'm writing. And it has not been the most efficient way to track my time, because if I want to use Pomodoros, which is basically writing sprints where I'm saying I'm going to work for 15 or 20 minutes or 25 minutes, which is my preferred time. I'm going to write for 25 minutes without distraction, and then I'm going to take a 5-minute break and then write again for 25 minutes. So we have a writing community here on Facebook and on YouTube called the Heart Breathings Writing Community, that the foundation of it is this type of writing sprint, which, by the way, we do have our June Double Down Day coming up this Saturday. So I'll link that calendar down below. We'll be live almost all day Saturday in 2-hour increments doing 25-minute focus sprints as a group. So if you want to come join us, I'll link that for you down below. But I have found that when I'm trying to do those sprints on my own, I am using my phone to track the time, like setting my phone as a 25-minute timer. And what happens is that even though I have my dings and sounds turned off, I can still see that I have a message on Instagram, or I can still see on the home screen that I have an email or a call or a Marco Polo or something like that. So if I'm casually glancing down to see how much time is left on my sprint timer, I am also then often getting pulled into, oh, well, let me go answer this quick Instagram. And before I know it, 20 minutes have gone by. And this is not the way I want to run my life. It's not my intention to be on social media when I mean to be writing. And so I'm nipping it in the bud, so to speak. I am putting an end to it now. And one of the things that I'm doing, besides the app timers, and I'm going to be actually turning off notifications, not just the sounds, but the actual like messages on my phone. I also purchased this little cube from Amazon. I can't remember how much it was, but it was like maybe $10 or $15, and they have them in different time increments. The good thing about this is that I don't have to use my phone at all. Now, it doesn't keep a record of anything, but it does track my time just like a kitchen timer. So this one has a 5-minute timer, 25 minutes, 15 minutes, and 45 minutes. And I like these time increments, but you can get them in different colors and different increments. But I like this because I like to do 25-minute sprints with a 5-minute break, and then my longer breaks are typically 15 minutes. So I probably won't use the 45-minute one as much. You can hear it beeping because I keep moving it. But if I wanted to set it for a 25-minute sprint, for example, I would just turn it to 25-minute, If I wanted to set it for 25 minutes, I would just turn it to where the 25 minutes is up and you hear it beep. And then on the bottom, it has a timer that's running. So I can just briefly look at it without being distracted by my phone to see how much time is left. Then it will beep at me when 25 minutes are up. And then I can turn it back to straight and then turn it on to 5 minutes so that now I have a 5-minute timer running. And that will help me, I hope, string together more focused sprints without having to ever pick up my phone for a timer or go to a different web page for my timer. So that's one big thing that I'm doing to increase my focus. Another thing that works for me time and time again, whether it's productivity or tasks or writing, is breaking things down into smaller chunks. And I don't know why I forget to apply this to my writing, because I use this in my HB90 method all the time, which, by the way, if you're watching this when this video first comes out, HB90 opens for enrollment this weekend. So definitely come back and look for that link. I will link it for you down below, but the registration won't open until Sunday at noon, but that is opening up again. So if you want to learn how to get more done, come join us for that. But with my writing, sometimes I forget to break things down into small, achievable tasks. I do it all day long with my big projects like marketing and videos and other things like that. But the same can apply to our writing. And sometimes when I sit down and I start to think about my edits, I'm just thinking about the entire novel and all the work that has to be done. And that starts to get super overwhelming. So to improve my focus and my joy and my ability to get things done, I'm going to be breaking it down into smaller segments of tasks. So first, instead of thinking about the entire novel, I'm just going to start my edits with Act 1. So let me tell you about what I've done so far in the editing process, since it's been a few weeks since my last Writer Reset video, and then you're going to follow me through the next steps. So the first thing I did was a post-draft brain dump. This was literally just sitting down. I think I sat down for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I just wrote out all my thoughts about the rough draft and the story so far, what I think needs fixing, what I feel like was really good, where I think things are going, and where I need to focus. And this ended up being about 5,000 words of just basically stream of consciousness. And it was really helpful to me to understand sort of where my weak points are and what I feel like was going well about the book. Another thing that I did was I went out to a coffee shop. I had one of my larger note cards, which is maybe like a 5x7 note card. And I wrote out what the major plot points of the novel. So on this part, I was focused on the entire book, start to finish, but I was only focusing on those major turning points. So for me, this is the opening scene and the hook, the first doorway of no return, and then the midpoint, the climax, and the resolution. So I just wanted to make sure that I had those nailed down in the present timeline, because I've got dual timelines in this book, and I wanted to make sure I was really clear on that and exactly what's happening. And what that does is it gives me a roadmap to follow. Like, I know at the beginning of the novel where I'm heading, and that is one of the advantages to finishing your rough draft, is often you start to know at least what the path you're following is, even if you don't have all the dots yet connected. So I did all of that work. I got those big note cards done, and that felt pretty good. I also started reading some books that have split timelines or dual timelines. So for example, the book that I'm reading right now is called The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. It is excellent. She is such a great writer, and I have heard amazing things about this book in the past, and it is not disappointing me. Now, what she does in this book for the majority of the beginning of it as dual timeline is it's literally just alternating. You have one in the present day, one in the past, one in the present day, one in the past, and each one in the past is from a different girl's point of view. And that really works for this particular story. I'm going to potentially experiment with that in my own, because that's one of the biggest questions that came up in my post-draft brain dump is, how am I going to weave these two timelines together in a way that makes it most effective? So I'm going to experiment with this of just simply alternating it and seeing how that feels. But sometimes it can be super helpful when you get to the editing phase, the drafting phase, at any phase, to pick up books in your genre. Or this isn't even a YA book that I've been reading. I've read multiple split timeline books at this point, and none of them have been young adult. So they're not exactly in my niche or genre, but they are mysteries. So they're adjacent, and they're giving me ideas. Even though the stories are very different from my story, it's giving me ideas as to the author's process and what works in storytelling and what doesn't. So sometimes reading can be effective in your edits. Next, I did something that I had started working on before I even finished my rough draft, which is created an outline of all of the scenes and chapters that are currently in my rough draft. Now, mine are not in order like they normally would be with a chronological book that follows you from point A to point B without ever like splitting off to different timelines. So I have large chunks of the present day timeline, and then I have like a huge section, like 40,000 words, that's all past timeline, and none of it is in order of how it's going to be when I start alternating things. So it's a bit of a mess, but I went through and I made that outline so I knew exactly what scenes I had already written, and made a list of scenes that I know I want to write that were not yet written yet. So this helps me to identify the holes of what I have and what I still need to write. So that brings me to today. So what I'm going to be working on today is I'm going to take my graph paper. So this is just a huge pad of graph paper. I think it's like 11 by 17, but I will link this for you. I got it on Amazon. I know you can also get this kind of graph paper at Office Depot, I'm pretty sure, probably Staples and other places like that. But it is just graph paper. It has blue lines to it. It's really nice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to section this off into Act 1, Act 2, Part 1, Act 2, Part 2, and Act 3. So 4 sections of the book. And I'm going to start working on the timeline. And above the line, I will write out anything that's happening in the present tense timeline. Below the line, I will start to write anything that is alternating scene by scene in the past timeline. I'm also going to take a brand new set of note cards and I'm going to begin to write out everything I know about each of those scenes in terms of what's the overview of the scene, what's my character's goal in that scene, what is the conflict and what's standing in their way, and what's the resolution? How does it end up? That's going to be mostly for the present day scenes. For the scenes in the past, I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of how does this tie into the present timeline and who knew about this. I'm going to make sure that I mark on my cards which of the characters at the cabin the night Vanessa disappeared knew about this event and who was it a secret for, because that's going to play into the mystery as well. So I really want to get clear on those details. So basically at this point, when I say that I'm going to be breaking this down into smaller tasks, what I'm going to focus on starting today is only Act 1. So I'm going to set up this grid. I'm going to take my note cards, but I'm only going to focus on Act 1. And I'm going to take those notes that I have about the beginning of Act 1, the hook, the inciting incident, and where Act 1 ends up at the first doorway of no return, which is the key event, the thing that locks our character into the main story, which in this case is we have characters who know at the beginning of the story that Vanessa disappeared a year ago. That's the inciting incident, is that Vanessa disappeared and no one ever saw her again. They're coming back to this cabin 1 year later to celebrate graduation and to kind of honor Vanessa's memory. And really, the main character, Lorelai, is looking for some kind of closure as to what really happened to Vanessa, because she has carried for the past year a lot of guilt and doubt about being the last person that saw Vanessa alive that night. And so it becomes a mystery with our sort of amateur YA sleuth trying to decide or trying to figure out really what happened so that she can find closure and move on with her life. And so by the time we get to the doorway of no return, we have an event happening at the cabin where they lose power and they're basically stuck on this island sort of by the river where they can't get off until tomorrow. So they're going to have to survive the night, and they don't know whether what's happening to them is paranormal. Is it Vanessa's ghost come back to haunt them, or is whatever person potentially killed Vanessa coming back to finish the job? And so there's danger, there's mystery, there's a lot of conflict, a lot of suspense, a lot of drama. And I just want to focus on that piece of the path. What is this part of the puzzle here, this top. And so part of what I'm going to do is I'm about to just go out to a coffee shop for a couple of hours. I'm going to take my blank graph paper and I'm just going to work on those questions. What are the scenes that are happening in Act 1 only, starting with the very first scene? I'm not going to be editing or rewriting anything I already have yet. I'm just going to be working on the order of scenes and the trajectory of what happens in each of those scenes. Then when I come home, I'm going to transfer all of that onto this. Now you can see this part of my plot wall is already pretty well finished. However, a lot of this stuff is going to change because in the edits, I'm realizing, things need to move around a little bit. So I'm going to figure all that out. I'm going to come back. I'm going to put it on the wall. And then what I'm going to tackle tomorrow in tomorrow's session is I'm going to actually create a new document that is brand new, clean slate, nothing on it yet. And I'm just going to copy it chapter by chapter. So I'll start with the prologue. I will fix and rewrite the prologue based on the things I decide today. And then once prologue chapter is done, I will go back to my original rough draft. I will copy chapter 1 or whatever I feel like is the right chapter to grab, and I will begin rebuilding a second draft from that first draft. When I hit any scenes that have not yet been written, I will write them. And that's the way I'm planning to work through my edits, is scene by scene, chapter by chapter, and not worry about where it's going to end up at the end just yet. I'm just going to break it down to one tiny step at a time, and I'm going to do it in 25-minute chunks or pomodoros. And I'm hoping that by the end of June, this entire thing will be done. But I'm going to just take it one day, one step at a time, and not overwhelm myself. So let's grab this graph paper and let's head to the coffee shop.
This is all we got. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love. This is all we got. Show me love, show me love. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. Sometimes life will push you down, make you fall onto the ground. But I know you will turn it around. Oh, this is all we got. And I know you'll make mistakes, get interference and lose your way. Find the light when it rains. Oh, this is all we got. Show me life, show me love. Make a change, time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me love.
Hello again. So it is the next day and I'm continuing on with edits. I got Evie in here in my office. She's doing a little bit of coloring with me. So here's how far I got. I kind of have things spread around on the floor, but let me turn this video around. So yesterday at the coffee shop, I had already done some of this plot work and I started working on my timeline. So as I had mentioned, I'm only working on Act 1, but I took this grid paper and I just counted 4 blocks and then 4 blocks below, so above and below the timeline. And then I put a bonus block here and then 4 blocks, another 4 blocks, and so on. So I've got Act 1, 2 Part 1, 2 Part 2, and Act 3, and then a little bit of space here at the bottom. Of course, got to throw some washi tape on there. But I am basically figuring out how I'm alternating. And so far you can see it's all in purple. So this is all Lorelai's point of view, but I'm about to add in my first non-Lorelai POV here in the past. So I'm going to start using some other color and then I'm going to start weaving those in. So that's basically all I got done, except that I also worked on my note cards. So on my note cards, I did put a goal, and I like to, especially once I've finished my rough draft, to have a basic idea of about how many words I'm working with in each act. So if you have a novel that is, let's say, 90,000 words and you divide that by 4, you're going to end up with about 22,500 words for each act. I'm not exactly sure how this will look once it's all edited. So I'm giving myself between about 15,000 and 22,000 words for this act. And just knowing from experience how many scenes that is for me and how much room that is to get to the point. So I know where I'm starting, which is part of why I filled out some of these plot points. I know the hook and the opening scene, and I know where I'm going. So that gives me the trajectory and the roadmap. Then to understand how many words I have on average to get there. Now, this is not obviously something everyone needs to do. You might just follow your intuition and it works out great. But I do like to make sure that my Act 1 climax happens between 20 and 25% into the book. So I just like to keep an eye on my word count, but then I stay flexible if it ends up being a little bit long or a little short. But I'm just trying to keep my eye on the pacing. Once I get to the editing, I'm starting to focus more on those kind of details. Now, in these actual note cards, I've mentioned this before, that I start with an overview of the scene, the goal of the scene in terms of the character's goal, the conflict that's keeping them from their goal, and then what's the outcome? Did they achieve their goal? Did something come up? Did the conflict create a new goal for the character, and so on? And part of the reason I don't always do this in my rough draft, but part of the reason I do this in my edits is multiple reasons for me. One being that I can make sure that whatever the outcome of this scene is naturally leads us into the next scene, because often something will shift or change in this scene from what the character expected, which then sends them on to the next scene and what the conflict is there, like a new conflict they're dealing with, new information they want to get, new relationship stuff. So it helps me figure out the flow of the plot. Another thing is the goal, because this is not about my goal as a writer. Sometimes I will write that, for example, like this on the back. I'll say my goal as a writer is to introduce such and such to the reader. But the character will have a goal in the scene. And part of the reason that I like to focus in on this in my editing note cards is because this informs my character arc. What is this character's goal in talking to this person? What is this character's goal in showing up at this cabin after a year? What is she hoping to accomplish in this scene? And for this character, this first scene for Lorelai in the present day timeline is to really decide, like, does she want to go through with this? Does she want to stay? And she's sitting there behind the bridge, kind of like the bridge is a gateway into no turning back for her in a way. And she knows that this is her chance to really decide, do I go and see these people I haven't seen for a year and start to really find closure with Vanessa's disappearance, or do I just turn around and go home? So that's her goal. And me knowing what her goal is in completing this action, in walking through this scene, helps me to know what type of interior monologue this character is going to have. What is her motivation in talking to people? How is she going to approach conversations? How is she going to approach information? What is she going to be feeling? What do I want the reader to be feeling? And it just makes everything more clear. Then when I know what the conflict is and the outcome, it gives me so much clarity about when I go back to these scenes to edit them, I can really tighten up the character arc, the motivation, the feelings, the emotions, and what the reader is seeing. I can't always focus on that when I'm writing the rough draft because I'm just trying to get the story on the page. So this type of process where, I've got kind of a messy story on the page, but now I'm beginning to structure it a little bit more tightly. This is where the magic is for me. And this is why I love edits, is because it starts to make everything clear. And every time I clarify a little bit more of what's going on inside the character's interior mind and their feelings and how they're approaching things and ramping up that conflict, it just allows me to kind of guide the book a little bit better. And I love it. So I did get quite a few of these note cards done, and I am pretty excited to have made that much progress in just one afternoon session. The other thing is this moment right here. So that moment was me feeling like a piece of the story got unlocked. And I've talked about this so many times, but it is for me one of the most fun, magical, exhilarating parts of being a writer. And it has legitimately been about 2 years since I felt this feeling, and I missed it, which is the feeling of something unlocking, like you're at your locker, you're putting in the lock, the combination a couple of different times and it didn't come open. And then you feel that last little piece fall in and you pull it down and it unlocks. Taking me back to high school. I don't even know if lockers are still like that anymore, but that for me is the feeling when a story unlocks. And sometimes for me, it is an image. Sometimes it's like a scene playing in my head, like a movie. And sometimes it's a twist that I hadn't figured out until that point. And I'm telling you, that moment at the coffee shop yesterday, when I told you I had finished this rough draft, but it's really rough. And part of the biggest issue still in my mind about this rough draft is how am I effectively going to weave the past timeline in with the current timeline and make it really interesting and a lot of tension and conflict and twists and turns. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks yesterday. And it was so satisfying and so much fun. And I'm just going to give you a bit of encouragement here that if, like me, for the past couple of years, you have been struggling to find your magic, your joy, the excitement of writing, I can promise you, you have not forgotten how to do it. You have not lost your mojo. You haven't lost your own magic. You have it still. If you have ever had it, or if you've never found it, if you feel drawn to it, you still have that magic. And I know that you can find it again. If you feel like it's time, just allow yourself to have fun with the story again. Go back to the things that were fun about writing when you first discovered it. For me, it's been clearing up my space, clearing up my calendar. I haven't been growing as fast on YouTube, but man, it is worth it to slow down sometimes so that I can get back to my joy. And I know that that is going to accelerate things in the long run. And I have held the faith now for 2 months that this writer reset of getting back to my joy, cleaning up my space, creating room in my brain, trying to get into a better focus mode, I have had the faith that it was going to pay off. And I feel like yesterday proved that it is. So edits are going well. I'm going to continue working on it today, but that is the progress I have made so far. And I'm excited to continue on with it. So I'm going to keep working on this plotting wall, and then, I'll keep you updated.
Make a change. Time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me light. Show me love. Show me light. Show me love. Make a change. Time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me light. Show me love. This is all we got. Show me light. Show me love. This is all we got.